balance is something that we talk about a lot on the channel, and I was thinking today about how sometimes you can't really get ahead by being too much of a purist. So, for example, let's say that I want to focus on being more healthy. So I say, well, I shouldn't ever go to McDonald's and eat fast food. And that's not a terrible idea. But then there's always that calling for a hamburger once in a while. And it seems like an awful shame to say I'm never going to go to McDonald's again because I like French fries and hamburgers. So is there a way for me to be conscious of my health and work on going in the right direction in that department, but also be able to, you know, go enjoy some fast food once in a while? And the answer probably is yes. And the thing is, if we cut out 100% of something and we say we're gonna 100% shun it, then that only works for a little while until you realize that life doesn't really work very well if you're an absolutist. It's like there's people who focus on compliance in a corporate environment, and those people tend to be very black and white. Maybe the same thing with legal teams, right? Because it's all the letter of the law. But what do you do when you have the human element added to it? A lot of people who are all about the letter of the law, they can tell you 100% of the time what the rules say, but they also can't really adapt to dynamic environments because they always go to the rule book as their safety blanket. And when you get to a situation where the rules don't quite seem to fit the situation very well, they kind of are like an ant that has run out of trail to follow. And then they just sort of freak out and freeze up, because once you get them out of that playbook of saying the correct answer, they're not able to figure out how to come up with a reasonable answer that is somewhere in the middle in the territory of the spirit of the law, but not the letter. So one thing I wanted to talk about is, let's just say that you're thinking about something like McDonald's, like I was saying. We're talking about having a healthier lifestyle. Well, there's things you could do to offset that hamburger you wanted to go eat, like have a routine that you walk 10 miles a day on the treadmill. Well, if you have a healthy exercise routine and you're not overeating in general, then, you know, maybe that hamburger is not a terrible idea after all. But in that case, we're talking about food. We're talking about something which affects your efficiency in life. And I would want to say there's a distinction to be made between something which improves or detracts from your efficiency and something which actually represents spiritual corruption. So, for example, if I say I'm going to talk crap about people all day on Monday and engage in water cooler gossip at the expense of everybody else, I'm just going to say all kinds of toxic things about people, and then I'm going to offset that by going to volunteer at the food bank next Sunday. Well, it doesn't work like that. Two wrongs don't make a right, and doing something good doesn't offset something bad you're doing if it's something that harms other people. But that's really the imperative. In terms of just routines, things which aren't evil, they're just maybe not super good for you. Well, it's probably better not to be too much of a purist. It reminds me of when I went through a little phase when I was a bit younger. I said I wanted to be a vegan. I don't know why. I just watched too many videos about how hot dogs are made or something. So I just decided, you know, maybe being a vegan would be good from a sustainability perspective and from a kindness to animals perspective. But then I go out and I start to realize, well, wait a second, you know, like there's leather on the seats of my truck. I've got a leather belt on. There's leather in my shoes. There's animal products everywhere. So if I'm going to be a vegan, then it's more than just not eating meat. I'm going to have to change a lot of things in my lifestyle, right? And then take it a little further. I can't even benefit from things that are being created as a result of animal products in any way. Well, when you go down that logical path, you don't have to think too hard to realize that it starts to get really complicated, expensive, and maybe not even attainable at all to be purely a vegan in that particular situation. So, you know, I kind of lost interest in it. But maybe there is a nugget of truth in there. You know, is it possible that that mass farming of animals is in some cases not good from a sustainability perspective? Sure. Is it possible that animals are treated poorly in slaughterhouses? Well, no doubt. You know, the world isn't perfect, and I'm not going to say that it's our job to make it a utopia necessarily, but maybe there are some things we can do to embrace moderation in a way that's going to invest in a slightly kinder, more hygienic, more sustainable world. But you don't necessarily have to say you're not going to wear a leather belt anymore, and you're never going to eat a can of chili again. Maybe just you know, add a little bit more green vegetables to your diet. It wouldn't be a terrible idea, right? You know, just something to think about. You know, can you not go ditch to ditch and just find a middle ground that serves you a little bit better? And it's not about saying I'm absolutely not going to do this or that thing ever again. It's just about kind of drifting more in the direction of something healthier, or more in the direction of something sustainable versus not in that direction. It's important to embrace things that are going to make your life better, but it's also important not to be so determined to fit yourself into a box that you wind up kind of closing yourself in, and then feeling like your life is boring because everything is being filtered out by some sort of a very aggressive rule book that you have made for yourself. You know, it's like if you have a microphone and you set it to filter out all of the highs and the lows, and then you wind up in a situation where it doesn't pick up anything, because at some point everything is going to get filtered out, and then you can't even understand the audio because there's nothing left after it goes through the filter. I see people who are isolated, maybe in a religious environment or something like that. We have Hutterites here, and they're kind of like the Amish. They're just a very conservative sect of something like Christianity. I don't know if it's exactly Christianity, but it's somewhere around in there. And the women make their own clothes, and they live in sort of a communal environment. You know, but those kinds of people who are very isolated, they you know, they live in a world where everything has something wrong with it. Everything is something that's of the world that needs to be avoided. And that's really kind of a scary place to live. Like, you don't need to be following the crowd all the time, but you don't want to be so determined to reform your life that you don't have room for anything that doesn't fit a very, very narrow narrative. So that's about it. Strive to be happy. And I will leave you with this thought. The Wiccan Rede says, harm none, but do as you will. And let us always remember that notion. If you don't do any harm, then pretty much anything goes. But if it does harm, don't be afraid to let it go. And as we try to figure out what harms us and what doesn't harm us, what harms others, what doesn't, a good rule of thumb is to just take a break from things. I mean, you give it up 100%, whatever it is, but you don't necessarily give it up 100% forever. If you're trying to be a better steward of your finances, then maybe you cut out 100% of discretionary expenses. Anything that you don't have to spend money on, you don't spend money on. But that doesn't mean forever. Maybe it's for 30 days. Maybe it's for a week. You want to invest more in your health? Maybe cut out fast food for 2 weeks. If that's something that you feel is a problem for you and you're always going back to it, then give it up for a while. Break the habit. But then if after you've gone through a period of letting go of some of these things, you feel like you miss them and you feel like you want to add that content back into your life, then add it back in. But add it back in a healthy way. When you give up something and you completely go on a fast from it, you let it go, you make a clean break from it, it helps you to look at that topic in an objective, fair way later on. And then you can say, well, you know what? I actually think that I do get some value out of that, so I want to incorporate that in my life just in a more healthy way than I did before. Like you could be a workaholic. You could always be working 80 hours a week, you know, and that maybe needs to stop. So you take a different job, or you break out of that culture of never being able to disconnect. But does that mean that you never go above and beyond and do anything extra, you know, for your work ever again? Well, no, not necessarily. But sometimes when you take a break from it, you can really see like what battles are important to fight and what are not. What are things that matter to you? What are not? I remember when I was going through a period of time trying to get my finances in order, I got rid of every single subscription that I had. I canceled all of it, and I was very self-conscious about it. But then after a period of time, worrying about $5 or $10 here or there stopped being a significant concern to me. I kind of had a chance to disconnect from my old habits, and I was okay in terms of how I manage my money. So like now I'm not worried if I'm paying $10 a month for Netflix or something. You know, I'm not, you know, I cut a lot of expenses out, and, you know, I overcame a lot of the bad habits. And so now I do have a few subscriptions that I pay for every month. And if I feel like I get value out of them, then I will happily do so. I don't worry about it. But I certainly am much more healthy about how I approach that than I was before, when I was wasting a lot of money on things I didn't need to be. So sometimes it's all about just take a break from things and spend some time getting to know yourself better, listen to your feelings, and if you feel like you need to bring something back into your life, it's never a problem to add things back in a more healthy and balanced way after you've taken a break from them. Sometimes that's something that we always feel. We feel like if we close the door on something, it has to mean the door's closed forever and sealed, shut, can never go back. And not necessarily. Sometimes you just take a little break and then come back with a better perspective on why things in your life are there and what value they serve. And so yeah, you can eat a bit more healthy, and you can still go have a hamburger once in a while if you want to. You know, I speaking of McDonald's, I was there earlier today, which is what got me thinking about this. So, you know, I went in there. I tend to walk around my neighborhood with a big thermos of coffee. I have it there. So I had it, went into the McDonald's, sat down, ate some McDonald's. And as I was walking out, I saw there's a sign on the door that says you can't bring in outside food and drinks. So I guess I violated the rules because I brought my own coffee in with me. And there's another sign on the door that says that you can't loiter, can't be there for more than 30 minutes. And I thought, you know, I think I may have spent more than 30 minutes sitting in there. And there wasn't any problem. I thought, isn't that an example of the spirit of the law versus the letter? Because, like, why does that policy exist? If you think about it, well, the no loitering, no outside food and drink, like, that's because, you know, like, you don't want a vagrant to come in there and sit there all day drinking beer in the lobby, right? Like, that's what that rule is there for. But if you're a purist, then, you know, you might kick out somebody like me out of the McDonald's because I stayed there 31 minutes and was 1 minute past my allotted amount of time before I left, or something like that, you know. And I think that's just a kind of a good example of how when we try to do things in an absolute way, when we try to take one rule and apply it to every single circumstance, it just doesn't work. Eventually it breaks down, and we have to realize that, you know, every day is a new day, and what worked for yesterday doesn't necessarily need to work for tomorrow. We can always change things up as we need to make life work for us in the best way possible. But the non-negotiables should always be the things that do harm to other people. When we say things that are hurtful to people, or we do things that harm others, those are the non-negotiables, where you shouldn't have any room for negotiation. You just 100% decide to cut off the bad habits if they're doing harm to others. As always, wherever you find yourself, good luck on your journey. Till next time, thanks so much for watching.